All right, so we've got a really unusual situation here.
Yeah.
A president-elect potentially facing sentencing on criminal charges. We're going to be looking at legal analysis and news reports to try to figure this out.
Definitely unprecedented.
For sure. And our goal today is to really try to help you understand this whole legal situation and all its complexities.
Yeah.
And really what it could mean, especially for us, as U.S. citizens.
Yeah. It's really not every day that we see something like this.
Right.
It really raises some fundamental questions about the U.S. legal system
Yeah.
and how it applies to the highest office in the land, the president.
Yeah. And to add to this whole complicated situation, Trump has said that if he takes office, he plans to fire Jack Smith, the special counsel who's leading the federal investigations against him.
Oh, yeah. That statement alone, it just throws a whole other wrench into this whole thing.
Yeah.
It's definitely causing a lot of debate about presidential power
Uh-huh.
and the independence of the Justice Department.
For sure. For sure. Okay. So let's take these cases one by one. Let's start with the one that's already got a conviction, the hush money case in New York.
Yeah.
What are the charges in that case?
So he was convicted on 34 felony counts of falsifying business records.
Wow.
And this all goes back to hush money payments that were made to Stormy Daniels during the 2016 campaign, allegedly to cover up an affair.
Right.
Trump denies the affair, obviously.
Of course. And what makes this case even more interesting to me is the timing of the sentencing.
Yeah.
It's scheduled after the election.
Exactly. The judge in this case wanted to avoid any perception that, the justice system was interfering with the election.
Right.
But this raises a really fascinating question. Could a president-elect actually be sent to prison?
Yeah, that's what everyone wants to know, right? What's the answer to that question?
Well, it's not a simple yes or no answer.
Okay.
A lot depends on the judge and how Trump's legal team handles things.
Right.
They're probably going to file appeals, and that could drag things out for years.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the whole issue of presidential immunity to think about.
Yeah, the Supreme Court recently issued a ruling on presidential immunity.
Yes.
I'm guessing that's going to play a big part in this.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Trump's lawyers will almost definitely argue that this Supreme Court decision shields him from actually having to serve any sentence.
Okay.
But it's really up to the judge to agree with that or not, so it's a really complex legal battle.
Yeah.
And the outcome could have huge implications for future cases that involve presidents and people running for president.
So there's a chance he could totally avoid prison time.
It's possible, even if he's not granted immunity, the judge still has some options when it comes to sentencing.
Okay.
The maximum sentence for these charges is 4 years,
Okay.
but it's not mandatory.
Oh.
The judge could decide to go with probation, fines, community service. There are a lot of options.
Wow. Okay. So a lot of uncertainty with that case.
Mm.
But one thing is for sure, even if he is sentenced to prison, he can't pardon himself out of this one,
Yeah.
right?
That's right. Presidential pardons only apply to federal offenses, and this hush money case is a state-level charge.
Gotcha.
So a presidential pardon just wouldn't work.
Okay, so that's the New York case. Let's move on to the two federal cases that are being led by special counsel Jack Smith.
Okay.
What are the main points of those investigations?
So these cases get into some really heavy stuff. One is focused on Trump's efforts to try to overturn the results of the 2020 election.
Wow.
Think about all those phone calls to officials in different states, the pressure on the Justice Department, all the events that led up to January 6th.
Right.
The second case is all about the classified documents situation after Trump left office. All those boxes of documents found at Mar-a-Lago.
Yeah, and it's with these two cases that his, vow to fire Smith if he's elected gets really interesting.
Right.
Yeah.
That statement really sets the stage for what could be a constitutional crisis.
Mm.
Can a president just fire the special counsel who's investigating him?
Right.
It's never happened before, so we don't really know if it's legal.
Yeah.
Plus, the Justice Department has this long-standing policy that says you can't indict a sitting president.
Right.
It's a minefield, legally and ethically.
Yeah. We've also heard from sources close to Smith that he doesn't plan on stepping down unless he's forced out.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So it sounds like he's going to see these investigations through to the end,
Yeah.
which could lead to a showdown between the executive branch and the justice system.
Yeah.
It really raises a lot of questions about the balanced power in our government and the rule of law.
So we've got the hush money case in New York, these two huge federal investigations, but there's one more we need to talk about, the election interference case in Georgia.
Right.
What's that one all about?
So this case focuses on Trump's alleged efforts to overturn the 2020 election results, specifically in Georgia. That infamous phone call where he asked the Georgia Secretary of State to find enough votes to change the outcome. That's a key part of this case.
And that case has hit some snags, hasn't it?
Yeah, there have been some challenges to the prosecutor's involvement
Okay.
because of a past relationship with another lawyer involved in the case.
Right.
It's not clear whether those challenges will be successful or not. However, Trump being reelected throws a whole other wrench into things. It raises the question of whether a state prosecutor can even legally go after a sitting president.
Wow. Okay, so 3 separate criminal cases, all sorts of legal complexities and potential constitutional issues.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
It's a lot to unpack.
It really is. But before we get into the civil lawsuits that Trump is also dealing with, I think it's important to just pause for a second and ask, what does all of this mean for the average person? For us, citizens of the U.S.
That's the big question, isn't it?
Yeah, and we'll get into that more right after this.
Stay tuned. Welcome back. Before the break, we were talking about the impact of all these criminal cases,
right,
on everyday Americans. And I think it's something we really need to consider carefully.
Yeah, I totally agree. We can't lose sight of the bigger picture here. This isn't just about abstract legal theories.
Right.
We're talking about real consequences for our democracy.
Exactly. This is a real-world stress test for our system of checks and balances.
Uh-huh.
How this whole thing shakes out is going to set a precedent for how presidents are held accountable, not just now, but for years to come.
Yeah, for sure.
It raises big questions about the rule of law, election integrity, public trust in our justice system.
It's a lot. I think a lot of people are feeling overwhelmed by it all.
Yeah.
But we can't just ignore it and pretend it's not happening, right?
I agree. As citizens, it's our responsibility to stay informed about all this, engage in these discussions, and hold our leaders accountable.
Okay, speaking of accountability, let's not forget that on top of all these criminal cases, Trump's also facing a whole bunch of civil lawsuits.
Right.
What can you tell us about those?
Well, there are several, and they cover a lot of different issues. Defamation, business fraud, his role in the January 6th attack on the Capitol.
Oh, wow. Okay, let's start with the defamation cases from E. Jean Carroll.
Okay.
Those have been all over the news.
Yeah, so Carroll, who's a writer, accused Trump of sexual assault and defamation, and 2 separate juries actually sided with her, awarding her a total of almost $90 million in damages.
Wow, $90 million.
Yeah.
What does that mean for Trump going forward?
Well, he's appealing both of those verdicts.
Okay.
But until the appeals court makes a decision, those judgments could have a huge impact on his finances and his reputation.
Right, and those aren't the only civil suits he's dealing with.
That's right. There's also a big civil fraud case that ended up with a judgment of almost $454 million against Trump and his company.
What?
A judge found that they had inflated the value of their assets to get loans and insurance.
It's kind of hard to wrap your mind around those kinds of numbers.
It is.
But I'm curious, even if he becomes president again, can he just ignore all of these civil cases?
No, he can't. The Supreme Court has been very clear that sitting presidents are not immune to civil litigation.
Okay.
Back in 1997, they ruled unanimously that a president can be sued while in office.
So just because you're president doesn't mean you get a free pass to avoid your legal obligations in civil court.
Exactly. It's a really important check on executive power and ensures that even the president can be held accountable for their actions.
Okay, so we've got criminal cases, potential jail time appeals, presidential immunity, and now all these civil lawsuits. It's like this huge legal maze.
It is.
And I bet a lot of our listeners are wondering, how did we even get here? How did we end up with a president-elect facing so many legal issues?
That's a really tough question, and there's no easy answer.
Yeah.
Some people say it reflects how divided our politics have become.
Yeah.
Where legal battles are just another weapon in this partisan war. Others think it shows a growing disregard for the rules and accountability among the people in power.
Okay, so what about the impact on the future of the presidency? Will all this make future candidates who have legal issues think twice about running?
Right.
Or could it embolden them? They see that Trump won even while facing multiple indictments.
That is the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
It's like we're standing at a crossroads. One path leads to people being more cautious. Candidates with something to hide might not run.
Okay.
They might be afraid of the scrutiny, the legal battles, the damage to their reputation.
So it could raise the bar for ethical conduct.
Possibly, but then there's that other path.
Yeah.
What if this just makes candidates with shady pasts feel like they can get away with it too?
Right.
Like they see Trump's victory and think they can overcome legal problems and still win.
Instead of deterring them, it normalizes that kind of behavior.
Exactly.
That's a scary thought.
It is, and it's not just about the candidates themselves either. Think about the voters.
Yeah.
How is this going to affect how much they trust the system? How they see the presidency, even their willingness to participate in future elections.
Right. Will they just get cynical and disillusioned with the whole thing?
It's hard to say for sure.
Yeah.
But one thing we know for certain is that this whole situation has exposed some weaknesses in our democracy.
Mm-hmm.
It's shown how the legal system can be used for political purposes.
Right.
And how powerful people can sometimes avoid being held accountable.
What about the long-term consequences of all this?
Yeah.
Will this affect future generations?
Absolutely. This isn't just about one election or one president.
Yeah.
This is about the health of our democracy.
Mm-hmm.
The choices we make right now as a country, they're going to shape the future for our kids and grandkids.
So what can we do? What are the takeaways from all this?
Well, first of all, stay informed.
Mm-hmm.
Don't just rely on headlines or sound bites.
Right.
Dig a little deeper, research different perspectives and really question what you think you know.
Yeah.
An informed public is the foundation of a healthy democracy.
And besides staying informed, what else can we do?
Have real conversations.
Yeah.
Talk to your friends, family, and people in your community about these issues.
Uh-huh.
Listen to different opinions, even ones you disagree with.
Right.
Having civil conversations is key to finding common ground and dealing with these complex issues.
It's easy to feel overwhelmed by all of this.
Yeah.
Or like there's nothing we can do. But you're right, we can't just give up.
Exactly. And remember, our democracy depends on people participating. Vote in every election. Local and national support organizations that share your values, contact your elected officials and tell them what's important to you.
Those are all great points.
Yeah.
I think it's important to remember that even with all the uncertainty and problems, there's still hope.
Right.
Our democracy has survived tough times before, and we can make it through this too.
I agree. The future of our country depends on all of us.
Yeah.
If we stay involved, stay informed, and stick to the principles of justice and democracy, we can create a better future for ourselves and everyone who comes after us.
All right, so we've covered a lot here, from the details of each case to the bigger implications for our country and the future of the presidency.
Yeah.
But there's one more big question we need to tackle. What does all of this mean for upcoming elections?
Right.
How might this change how we choose our leaders and what kinds of candidates decide to run?
That's a topic we're going to explore in the last part of this deep dive.
Okay.
So stay tuned.
We're back and we're ready to jump into this last part of our deep dive.
Yeah.
We've talked about all the charges, the potential consequences for Trump and what it all means for our democracy.
Right.
But looking ahead, the big question is, how will all of this affect future elections?
It's a question that's on everyone's mind, and honestly, we're in uncharted territory.
Yeah.
There's no roadmap for a situation like this.
So let's talk about those future elections.
Okay.
Will all of this make potential candidates with legal problems hesitate before running? Or could it actually embolden them? They see that Trump won, even though he was facing multiple indictments.
That's the real dilemma here. It's like a fork in the road.
Uh-huh.
On one hand, it might make people more cautious.
Right.
Candidates with skeletons in their closet might think twice
Okay.
because they'll be worried about the scrutiny, the legal fights, the damage to their reputation.
So it could raise the bar for ethical behavior.
Yeah, potentially, but there's also the other side of the coin.
Right.
What if this just emboldens those candidates with questionable pasts?
Yeah.
What if they look at Trump's win and think, hey, I can get away with it too?
Right. So instead of deterring them, it normalizes this kind of behavior.
Exactly.
And that's a pretty unsettling thought.
It is. And it's not just about the candidates themselves. We have to think about the voters.
Yeah. How will this affect their trust in the system?
Right. Will they become more cynical,
Wow.
more disillusioned with the process, or will they demand more transparency and accountability from the people running for office?
Yeah. Will they just check out completely?
It's tough to predict.
Yeah.
But One thing's for sure, this whole situation has revealed some serious vulnerabilities in our democracy.
Yeah.
It's shown us how the legal system can be manipulated for political gain.
Yeah.
And how sometimes people in power can escape being held accountable.
So what about the long-term impact?
Right.
Will this have consequences for generations to come?
Absolutely. This goes beyond just one election or one president. This is about the very foundation of our democracy.
Right.
The decisions we make today as a nation, they will shape the future for our kids and grandkids.
So given all of that, what can we as everyday citizens do?
Well, first and foremost, stay informed.
Okay.
Don't just rely on headlines or sound bites. Dig a little deeper.
Right.
Do your own research, look at different perspectives, and be willing to challenge your own beliefs.
Okay, so be informed. What else?
Engage in meaningful conversations. Talk to your friends, family, neighbors about all of this. Listen to their viewpoints, even the ones you don't agree with.
Yeah.
Civil discourse is so important for finding common ground and tackling tough issues like these.
You know, it's easy to feel overwhelmed or like our individual actions don't matter.
Right.
But we can't just tune out.
I agree. We have to remember that our democracy relies on active participation. Vote in every election, whether it's local or national. Support organizations that are fighting for what you believe in. Reach out to your elected officials and let them know what's important to you.
I think those are all really important points. And, you know, despite all the uncertainty and challenges we're facing,
Yeah.
I think it's important to remember that there's still hope.
Right.
Our democracy has been through a lot. It's faced tough times before we can get through this.
I agree. The future of this country is in our hands. Yeah. If we stay involved, if we stay informed, and if we hold on to those core principles of justice and democracy, we can create a better future, not just for ourselves, but for generations to come.
I think that's a great note to end on. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. It's been a complex and at times overwhelming journey.
It has.
But we hope you've come away with a better understanding of this unique and consequential situation. And remember, the power to shape our future ultimately lies in our own hands.
That's right.
Thanks for listening.